presence. مرا میبینی و هر دم زیادت میکنی دردم. تو را میبینم و میلم زیادت میشود هر دم. درمانم نمی آیی نمیدانی مگر دردم. سامانم نمی کوشی نمیدانم چه سر داری. It's a really good question. I'll give you two personal examples. The third one will also be personal, but it takes a different shape. There was a Persian movie being shown at theater in Japantown maybe 25 years ago. So I decided to go, and me and my family went there. And as I was going up the escalator, I looked down and there was this young Persian man, probably 5 years older than I was. Didn't know him, but he was very much like Arman. I look at him and I bow respectfully and I say hello. He greets me back in kind. And that was like 25, 30 years ago, and I still remember it. It was such a weird thing. It was as if some part of me knew certain parts of him. I don't know how or why, but there was a quality to him which I liked. While I was doing my graduate program in San Francisco, I was going to the business office. Again, going up the escalator, I looked down and there is this young woman. There was something about her, and I don't know what it was. And even though I had to go and pay for my dissertation, I said, you know what, I need to go down and see who she is. And I go down and she's gone. And I spend the next 2 hours walking around the campus looking for her. I just looked down and there she was. That's all. I didn't know her from Adam. And I couldn't find her. 6 or 7 months passed by, and I hear this voice with an accent. And you can recognize who's Persian, who's Arab, who's this, who's that. So I said, oh, she's Persian. Let me see who it is. And it's the girl. And it was my defense. I had to defend my dissertation. I said, well, you know, there was like 20 people waiting for me to go and tell them about my essay, and then they're going to ask questions and I have to respond to their question. And then there is this girl. I said, you know what? Forget the committee and my degree. I'm just going to wait and wait and wait until she comes out. She did after like 5 hours. She was one of those talkers. Point of the two ridiculous and infantile story I shared with you is that sometimes you run into certain people. And there is something about them. You don't know what it is. I mean, you can call it magnetism, you can call it charisma, you can call it a mystery, you can call it Malcolm, the X. Or, you know, as Simon Cowell has this show, The X Factor. Some people just have the X Factor. It's like blessing or a curse from the gods. There is something about them. And then you test them out, and time will reveal to you if what you've experienced about those people, if that X factor is in an infantile, immature, unripe stage, or they've actually ripened. And usually if you're young, if usually the other person is young, the mystery will capture your attention. You will walk towards them, you will miss a lot of time and energy in them, you'll create a wonderful history, but time will reveal, even though they have magic on the inside, they happen to be unqualified as a vehicle to hold that magic. So they need to wait. It's one of those stories that have fascinated the Persian world, and I suppose to some extent the Arabs and the Turks for a number of years, which is the story of Rumi and Shams. It's a love affair between two men. One happens to be like 40, the other happens to be 20, not like Plato and Socrates. That Shams, this older man, looks at this young kid Rumi and says, wow, this guy is fascinating. I want him to be my student. But looks closer, a bit closer at his interior, the way he moves, the way he walks, the way he talks, and he says, you know what? I can see the X factor. He has a presence to him, but he's far too immature at this stage. I can't give him what I want to give him. He's not a good receptor to it. So he says, I'm going to go away. Hopefully we'll meet again. And they meet about 21 years later. It's either 17 or 21 years later. And when they meet, now Rumi has this presence. He also has this ability to receive the teachings of this other guy who's close to about 55 or 60. So usually when you're young, lack the experience, proper experience, you're governed by your intuitive feeling that this person has this X factor inside him or her, pursue them. And you do only to realize it's no good. Then there is another kind of a presence that happens, and it's a little tricky. You go somewhere and you look at the people in the room, like this room, and you don't feel much about anyone. everybody looks normal, common, to some extent immature. And then someone opens their mouth. And you say, well, it's okay, not bad, but you're not really that interested just yet. As you spend more time, something begins to open up inside and you don't know what it is. It's both inspiring and frightening at the same time, because it'll leave an impression. You will take that stuff home and you will share them with your companion, you'll share them with your friends, because your assumption is if you're feeling something about the conversation you had somewhere, other people, your friends, will also feel the same way. Only to realize that, well, when they said what they said, there was a certain quality to the language, certain passion, certain intensity, certain experiences, certain emotions. You take all that stuff and spit them out as pieces of information. Now, you may be very intense, emotionally charged, but your friends can't but misinterpret and misunderstand what you're saying to them. And so you realize that they're not really getting you, so you walk away. And so you place your body and your five senses in the space that inspired you by that person. And as you become more and more and more infected by the presence which holds language, emotions, experience, all sorts of things, as you become more infected, what happens is something about the other person is seeping and getting itself inside you. And they begin to occupy more space inside you. All of a sudden, the way you look at them, the way you feel about them, very, 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 very different. It's really no different than gradually falling in love. It's like you don't know much about Carmen, even though she wants to yawn, but respectfully, she keeps herself all together. So you guys hang out, and you look at Carmen, nothing. But then you hang out, and you guys begin to share stories, and there comes a point where you begin to miss her. Where is she? She's not in class today. And you realize that there is something about Carmen, her presence, that impacts you in a very positive way. So you have two kinds of presence. One is gradual. It takes place slowly. There is nothing at the beginning, but through the interaction, you realize something, you feel something, you intuit something. There's a very, very strong and intense impression that's left upon you. And then you realize that without this person, breathing is very, very difficult. And then there are those moments where you look at someone and you say, wow, there is something about them that I really, really like. There is also another thing that happens. Imagine you are a Plato and you're sitting in the class being taught by Socrates. And you look around and you say, man, Socrates is so great. I mean, look at, everybody listens to him. When the class ends, people applaud him, and so on and so forth. And you say, you know what? I like what Socrates is doing. I like the way he talks, I like the way he walks, I like the way he quacks, and I like that profession. I want to go into that business. So it's a really, really healthy envy to have, because you're inspired by a set of ideas that are really quite transformative. And you say, I want those things. And so you go to school and you get some degrees and you say, well, it's my day now. I'm going to go in the classroom and become like a Socrates. And then you open your mouth the way I do. And people are inspired. They're really like waiting to hear what you have to say, and your mouth opens. And it's like ice. Anyone out there who was inspired becomes frozen. Why? Because just the way you are, you have like zero presence to you. You spit out information, you don't really understand yourself. There are no passions, nothing. And sometimes, it's history is what manufactured presence. I mean, I wasn't around 2,000 years ago to see who Jesus was and what he was like. Maybe he was a boring chap. I don't really know. But, all these churches come from nowhere. All these books about Jesus, about Christianity come from nowhere. And I say, this guy must have been a miracle worker. I don't really know. So when I look at the Bible, I say, good, I'm now going to be in the presence of Jesus Christ, some guy who lived some 2,000 years ago. What I fail to realize is that there has been 2,000 years of advertisement about this man. They have made him into something that he either was or wasn't. But regardless, I'm a victim of those sets of advertisement. So the Bible becomes very sacred, but not the entire Bible, not the 27 books of the New Testament, because I don't really care for Paul and Jack and Bob. I only like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Why? Because these are the only books who tell the story of Jesus. And so sometimes history creates presence, some inspired tales about people. and they may not even be true.